So for these stencils that we're using, this is a brand called Tattoo Pro. Now these are custom tattoos that actually are going to enable you to kind of freehand do the things you want. Now inside of this, it did come with a little, what I would consider a flash palette that gives you some ideas of how you can build the stencils up to get different tattoo ideas. Certainly you can take your own and make it your own, but if you need some sort of reference to go off of, this is a great visual to have on hand. Now, there are the ones that I showed you prior, but then there's also these that work as an outline. There's some little filler stars, things like that. But then also think these edges can be used as a base also. So you can kind of hold the edge and you can spray around there to get a sharp edge if you want to. Just kind of take what you have and the different tones that are in here to make it your own. So we're going to be using our airbrush again for this. And now I'm going to use the black. And I'm going to kind of custom blend my own color because remember, I don't want it to be straight black. It's a bit aged, so I'm going to mix the black, a little bit of blue, maybe a tint of white, and thin it out a little bit with some alcohol. That way it's not as opaque when the application goes on. So giving the black a good shake. I like a bit more of an aged look to the tattoos. I find it looks much more realistic than just doing it straight black. The straight black can sometimes be too harsh and look too obvious. So taking mostly black here. And again, just maybe 1 or 2 dots of blue. Not too much, we just want the slightest of illusion that there's blue there. And then I'm just going to do 1 tiny little drop of white. That's it. Now before we get started again, we haven't cleaned this area off, so we're going to go ahead and clean this area off with some alcohol. And we'll just go ahead and do this whole area so that way we have it free and ready to go from now. Now remember, this is the arm that we covered the tattoo up, so when you're cleaning off with alcohol, make sure that you're not running into the area that you've already covered up. Another thing to think about too is you want the tattoos to be visible, but they shouldn't always just be stamped on the outside. Sometimes there will be some on the inside a bit to give much more of a realistic appearance as opposed to just looking like a stamp, and a stamp. I'm going to go ahead and mix our color in here. Like I said, I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of alcohol, not a lot, just 3 drops or so. Blend this in with the color, and this will just kind of shear the product down a little bit so it's not as full and opaque as before. Now we can test the color on the paper here. Mix a little bit more. This color is still a little bit too straight black for me, so I am going to go ahead and add a little bit more of that blue in. Mix again. Test your color. Now it's looking a bit more like I want it to. It's looking a bit more of like an aged tattoo color versus just a straight black. You don't want it to look like the airbrush tattoo from the beach. Unless, of course, they're getting an airbrush tattoo from the beach as a character, then you want it to look like an airbrush tattoo from the beach. But if you're looking for realistic tattoo effect, not going straight in with full color is going to be your best bet. Now, for this, I'm going to go ahead and put one of these gloves on just so I don't spray over top of my hand too much and cause a big mess. And I'm going to plan first with just the light outline so I know where to go from there. So I'm going to say that this will be about here. Now, these are flexible, so you can hold them around the skin. Just know you're going to have to constantly keep moving them around while you're working. So work on one section of it, pause, move down, hold the next section. You just want as flat of a surface on the skin as possible before you start in with the airbrush itself. I'm going to have you kind of lift to there. Is that comfortable? Yeah. Okay. So it's always good. So I had her, I tested where I wanted it to go before she moved her arm, because you want it to see how it's going to look in the laid back natural position. If their arm is up like that and you do the tattoo, when they release it, it's going to be a completely different shape and different area than where you planned it. So knowing where you want it to go is ideal. So now, I'm just going to lightly start around the edge here. I'm not filling the entire thing in because I'm just using this as basically an outline. And this is really where your airbrush control is going to come from. So practicing as much as possible with the control of it will give you a better result. C2, you're just kind of working around with where your hand is able to hold it. So now you see, we sort of have the general outline of where the tattoo is going. We didn't just fully blank fill it in with the black, because what we're going to do now is we're going to find the corresponding inside piece. So now you can take the inside stencil. Now you have these little tabs. You can line them up with the other ones and know exactly where this inside piece will go. Sometimes you may need to flip it over. In this case, this is the right direction. Just follow the outside edges and see where it matches up with. So now, I'm going to lay this down, same as before. I'm going to first focus on this top area, and then we'll move around to the different sides and build from there. And think of too, when you're planning where the stencils are going, certain things will be darker than others. So for example, these sort of cracks in the face, I want them to be a bit darker than everywhere else. So I'm putting a bit more product and I'm focusing a bit longer on there than I will for, say, the eye sockets, because those I can add a little bit more texture and shading to later. But certainly getting the general outline is a good base to start on. This definitely takes some patience. That way you're not messing up where they're going and how they lay down. You just want it to be, like I said, as flat as possible so that you have a nice sharp edge to work off of and you're not losing any of the detail. Now these airbrush tattoos are very fun, but you can see how they do take a bit more time than the other ones. So if you're planning a look that has a good bit of airbrush tattooing to it, just know to leave yourself enough time to actually achieve the look that you're going for. Now we can remove that, and you can see here we already have a good base for a custom skull tattoo. I'm going to go back in now with the tip of this airbrush off and just bump up a little bit of the shading detail in certain areas. This will just give another layer of depth to it. And you can see too, certainly you can make it much more opaque than this with the airbrush outline. But when you're first starting to practice, it's a good idea just to go lighter on it and then build it up freehand from here. If you go too heavy with the initial spray, then it's really hard to tone it down from there. You can see how you can just shade and shadow around to add dimension where you want it. I'm going to do the outline a bit some more as well. I want to give a little bit more shading in here. And think of too, remember, you have these edges to use as a shading tool. So say you're going around here and you need something to give a harsh edge, hold this tool around the side, and then you have a nice sharp edge that you're working off of instead of going freehand with it. You can also use, this was a pretty good one here, to give the shape of the skull. So while I deepen the shading here, I'm just going to hold this so I have an edge to go off of. Gives you a much more clean edge to work with. These can also, by the way, you can cut these out individually and give it more control over where you're placing it. Sometimes it's easier to do that than to have it in the actor's face like this. Though if you're able to work it around, it can be fine. Now the great thing about these little stencils is that they are flexible, so you are able to bend them and adjust them to fit your needs more appropriately. And remember too, you can make your own stencils. You can buy some thin acetate from the craft store, draw a design on there, and then use an X-Acto knife to cut out. Or if you have a silhouette printer, which is a popular printer that does some specific dice cutouts, you can also use that to cut it out for you if you're doing something custom. It all just depends on what you're doing and what you need it for. But use these tools to really sharpen the edges up. Going in with some more detail, a bit freehand on this. I find sometimes I work better freehand than with the stencils, but it may be opposite for you. You might find that you like the stencils having the guides better. And again, you can look up reference images so you have some ideas of how these things will look. Or if you're just using the stencil as a base and kind of filling in from there, then you're really making it your own. Now what I'm going to do also, I wonder if I could use this. I'm going to use this tiny bone as a stencil edge because I want to give some shading to these teeth, just slightly. So I'm going to go up in some lines here on the teeth. And again, just be patient, take your time. Make sure there's a reason for why you're putting something where you're putting it. All those sorts of things. Same thing with the bottom here. I'm going to fill these in a little bit just to add a little bit more depth and dimension. Just intensifying the cracks in the skull here, giving it, again, a little bit more dimension. then slowly it'll start to take form. Once you sort of get into these tattoos, you can really just spend hours and hours kind of custom spraying and airbrushing around. And getting these to the level that you like. Definitely not a slow process. I guess it would be fast, right? I'm going to go ahead and use this bone in here. Since we know that it could look like it's cutting through here, I'm going to take it up slightly above with the nozzle back on. I'm just going to blow around the outside a little bit. To give me an outline. Now I have a light outline of a bone there. If I want to go back in with a larger one, determine the direction that it needs to go, which would be this one up here. Again, they're not always going to match exactly how you want them to. So if we wanted to fill it in completely, we could take this one down and totally fill it in. I actually kind of like that it's just subtle like that with the brief overspray. So I'm going to leave it as a subtle one, but I am going to continue it down onto the bottom. Imagine that it's cutting right through here. And do the same thing. Just a really light overspray. Then we can do the same thing, going directly across the other side. Keep in mind too, when you have some spray on here, you might want to clean it off in between. Especially if you're going to be flipping it over to use the opposite side. Now you have makeup on here and you just want it to be clean so you're not getting smudges all over the skin. So just taking a quick paper towel, you might need to use some alcohol in some cases to clean them off completely. But as long as you get the majority of it off of there before you go back in, you should be safe. Say this one's a little bit shorter than the others. imagine it's cutting through like this, right out and into this side. From there, we can just keep building and layering. I think I'm going to do a tiny little one down here. She just really likes skulls. Now let's do this one a bit more full coverage. When you pop that off, easy, there you go. You can fill in a bit too. So think too how you can use different things to fill in. So for example, say we want to do some little dots to bring a little bit of dimension into the look. There's also this sharp edge that we could pull a little bit of things in. Something that you can use to just give fill to it. So what I'm going to do is come around on this side and work on the inside of the arm here. I'm going to add some stars. I think maybe this might be her signature. She's already got some star on the face too. So let's add a few more. Got some stars in there. Let's take maybe, we'll do some shadowing around here with this sharp edge. We'll just make our own design here. It'll always be a bit darkest at the base, right along the edge, and then a bit lighter going up from there. And kind of create a little bit of a swirl technique here. Again, make sure you keep the edges clear here so you're not getting big smudges where you don't want them. Think of too, if you want to add colors in, look at the way colors age tattoo-wise. It'll never be straight yellow. It'll be yellow with a little bit of brown because it's mixing with skin tone. Things like that you can use to plan your other looks out. See, now we're starting to get a bit of a background going to the tattoo. It's making it appear much more like it's one cohesive piece versus just something that's stuck together. So remember, I want to get around the outside too. So I'm going to continue this into the inner area of the arm. I'm going to start with it holding here. And then adjust my hand position as I move up. That way it flows naturally with the body. So now that we have some of our airbrushing on in there, we can continue adding things, but I'm going to go and add a couple of our little filler ghouls here, because I think they'll add another layer in. And let's practice too on just how you can really build these with one another and create something really unique and your own style. Okay, let's say We want to add this little guy, maybe we'll put him somewhere over here in between the two. We could put him down here as well if we wanted to. I think over here would pair pretty nicely on the opposite side. So we've already cleaned the skin with alcohol, which we know. So we're going to go ahead and place this down. Take our wet cloth. Saturate it, and then once we have this down, we can continue building some more looks. You know, you don't ever have to just stop at one. You can do an airbrush one, pause, add something else, go back. You don't have to complete the entire thing on one portion before you move to the next. It's all about just building and adding layer and different thing to different thing. Now we kind of have this little ghoul in here that we can go back in with our stencils, and we can add a little bit more detail around him. Or we can also go back in with our pen. We can add details around here as well and just start to really build up. For example, we might want to darken this a bit in some areas. You might want to take this out a little bit. If you want to extend it slightly. Or maybe darken certain areas, you can do also. Remember, you could do the same thing with your paintbrush and plain Skin Illustrator if you want to. I like the idea that this is kind of branching out on its own and almost like it's part of the arm, so I'm bringing it in its own direction. Maybe this guy connects up to that one. Wraps up a bit there, and so on and so forth. Just take it and really make them your own with these. You're never stuck to it just being the one look. You can always use your artistic vision and really make it how you'd like it to look. Or just play around with it. Play around with the different techniques, with the different tones, get used to different methods, and then build from there. Having the sharp line in this that's already softly pretty diffused will give a little bit more of a dramatic look to it and a little bit more of a contrast. So So it can give you better dimension to the look, especially if you're trying to get something really striking. And again, don't just stop on the side, make sure it's connecting around. Just gives a better idea of a complete look, or even just kind of ties it together a bit more. Since they are different colors, this one would appear as a bit more of the age tattoo versus this one here. And again, you can go in with this on top of your airbrushing too. Kind of bump your fine details up if you'd like to. Use it to sharpen the edges in different areas. It's all up to you. It's all up to your creative freedom and, you know, whatever you're looking for the design to be. But you can just really layer all these different techniques. You don't always have to use the one. Like I said, you can go multiple. You can build things up. You can use different edges to kind of create a more complete image as opposed to just stamping one thing right on. But take your time and have fun with it.